go and build yourself up. You're too skinny. So that's how that started. So that's how I kind of got on the road, and I had a very successful career in Britain in high school, and also I was a member of the British junior national team.
That's pretty neat. That's pretty neat and interesting that you actually started on your own, right? It was no one else. It was you throwing the rocks on the river, and then you got the discus, and then you started training, and now, well, you're a world master champion. So a long way, all the way from that beginning, but it's pretty interesting. Besides, let's say, track and field that I know that you've done, and the comment that you did regarding weightlifting, I think we're going to revisit this in a minute. But did you practice any other sports? You're so tall. Did you ever practice, I don't know, basketball or anything like that?
Right. So I did play, and this is in England, mind you. So the basketball standard was not as good back in my case, the 1970s. But I could easily dunk a basketball. And I actually got caught for goaltending in high school. Which I didn't even know what goaltending was until I got caught by a referee who actually knew what we were supposed to do.
So they were throwing the ball to the hoop, and you were taking it and dunking it.
Yeah. I had in college, my vertical jump was about 90 centimeters, 36 inches.
Really nice. Really nice. So you did play basketball, but well, at the end you found passion on track and field. And at the age of 15, getting this kind of like marks and like these results were really promising, right? You have a personal best on the discus throw with the 2 kilo of over 56 meters, right?
Yes. So I went to college. I went to a sports science university called Loughborough, which is spelt weird. So anyway, it's still one of the best sports science universities in the world. And I worked through, I got on the British senior international team when I was 23 or 24. My best throw came when I was 22 years of age as an under 23. And my career looked pretty promising. What changed, and it sort of creates a bit of a segue to masters athletics, is I came to America when I was 25 years old in 1978, and I got my master's and PhD between 1978 and 1985 at the University of Illinois. But I didn't realize when I moved to America that it was going to be very, very difficult for me to compete as a non-university, non-collegiate athlete. So I pretty much nixed my young career. So when I was 58 and a half, I thought about masters sport, and I actually bought a used pair of discus shoes because I was so unsure that I'd be any good at it.
Not even new ones.
Yeah, not even new. They were $10 off eBay. So on Father's Day, when I was 58 and a half, I went to throw with her through the 1 kilo, thinking about getting ready for when I turned 60, and I threw about 38 meters after 30 some years away from the sport.
You still got it. So
then I thought, maybe I could get in the top 10 in the United States, because you didn't mention the beginning, but I've lived in the United States most of my adult life, but I do still compete for Britain because of my history there. So I got into masters sport, and I was reasonably successful, but I improved from 60, 61, 62, 63, 64. When I got to 65, that year, in 2018, I won the World Masters Championship. And I was luckily ranked number 1 in the discus with 50 meters, number 1 in the hammer throw with just under 48 meters, number 1 in the weight with 30 meters, 30 centimeters, and was number 2 in the throws pentathlon. So that was a absolute magic year for me. And I am going to be 70 in about 6 weeks. New Year's Eve is my birthday. So I'm
Happy
hoping.
birthday! Happy birthday!
Happy early birthday.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm looking forward to, like we all do. We kind of can't wait to get older in this sport sometimes. So I'm looking forward to the next year and so on. And it's become part of my life and part of my wife's life. She's a masters athlete as well.
I was gonna ask you about that, right? So you and your wife both are like master athletes, but really, really good ones, right? How do you manage to train and compete and travel with her? Do you like spend a lot of time in the house together, and then you have to do these competitions? How do you like get this balance between your work, well,
Yeah,
like the sports and the life balance, let's say?
right. Um, I often say that we are unpaid professional athletes. I mean, we are our 7-day week, and sometimes it's more like a 10-day cycle. But we are core athletes, so our priorities are athletics first, and we obviously have other interests which we can talk about in a bit. But um, we travel a lot. I spent 9 weeks in Europe this year, which instead of owning another house to get out of the Florida heat, I get out of the Florida heat by flying somewhere that's cooler. So, so we do, and I do. I must admit that 9 weeks on the road, it probably has moved my throwing down more than I wanted it to get. So I need to try to address that as a life balance issue. But we eat very healthily. We make sure that we see the doctors regularly. I train in a variety of ways. It's not just weightlifting and throwing, but agility, flexibility. Um, I have a good coach locally, although locally being 2 hours away these days, but in America it's a big country. So, but no, it's one of the core things that we do. So if that answers that question a little bit.
And well, tell me, what is your motivation to compete at a master's level? Because well, you competed when you were younger,
Yeah.
and then you came back. Why did you come back?
Um, several reasons. Both of my kids had gone off to college at about the time when I decided to at least think about taking up master sport again. So both of my children, my son went on to a full scholarship for basketball and then played in the Euro League for 2 years in Britain and Spain. My daughter got a full scholarship for volleyball. So when I was a parent with them, bringing them up, I must have watched 1,000 games. So it became to be my turn and think about doing something for me. So that was, filling the time that I would have. That was one reason. The second reason, a little bit, is I felt like I never can reach my potential as a young athlete. And I wondered if this would give me the opportunity to see if I was any good. And as it turned out, I was better than I thought. I mean, I've surprised myself. I don't say that in a conceited way. Now, if you really want to know why I do this, and this is, I think if you start to get people to think about it, I enjoy the constant challenge of trying to improve myself. The technical aspects, I've referred to the intellectual challenge of throwing the discus. And I read something just the other day. Pablo Casals was a very famous cellist. And they said, "You're 92 years of age. Why are you still practicing?" He said, "Because I think I can get better." And I think that's why, at the end of the day, no medals, no accolades, I will be out throwing because it feels good and I want to see if I can improve or maintain where I'm at.
That's so powerful. That's so powerful. And I think the events where you compete against yourself, because you're not competing against the rest of the field. It's you against the metrics, right?
Yeah, many times. I mean, I went to the World Championships in Tampere and I didn't do well in the discus, but there's a half a dozen guys in the world that, yeah, one of them actually lives 50 miles from me. So I've been very fortunate. He was #1 in the M65 discus last year. So every competition, he and I are very close. I used to win a few more. He's won a few more, and we're pretty even. So that's good.
That's good. That's really good. There's a question that, well, you're almost 70 right now.
Yep.
You still got it. You are doing great. I've watched your competition on the discus throw, and I was impressed when I saw you throw the discus over 40 meters, and the technique and the passion that you put it. I mean, it's amazing. I really enjoyed it. But is there any, let's say, a time for retirement? I know that you just started again, but when would you think it's a good time to retire as a master athlete? Or are you planning to compete all the way?
Now, I've given some thought to that question, and I'll answer my individual piece after giving you an example. I was in Italy in 2019, and there's an extremely famous masters thrower called Carmelo Rado, who had just reached about 85 years of age, and he spoke great English. And I just went over and never met him. I said, hey, just wanted to congratulate you on your amazing career. And he said, this is my last international competition. So really, he said, and bearing in mind, he's getting towards the end of his life. So his time was ticking. He said, when training and competing starts to get in the way of enjoying other aspects of one's life, that is the time to stop. And I've thought about that, and I think for him, it's 5, 7, 10 years, I don't know however many years he had left, that was the right thing to do. He's still training and he's still throwing, he's just not doing the big stuff. Now, for me personally, there's a lot of emotional energy associated with getting ready for big events. And I don't see not competing through at least Gothenburg in 2024, which I'll be 71, should still have a good sense. But I either will want to do well or not compete. And I don't know when I'll ever make that decision. It may be just made for me. You gradually kind of slow down a little bit. It's not as serious. But I don't want to throw beneath my potential. So I'm not going to admit to you that, I'm going to do this forever. I may well, but I don't know right now whether that actually will be the case.
Really interesting point of view. Really liked your answer. No, and the fact is, well, we were competing with Robert the other day. He's 82, right?
Yeah.
He still got it, right? He's doing great. So I think as long as you're enjoying it and you feel passionate about it, it's great. It is a great opportunity because it's not just the competition per se. I know that that's really important for you and the kind of preparation that you do. It's highly important, but also it's the friendship, the travel, the peers that you find. That's also really nice, right? And it's part of a master's community, let's say.
It is. I think everybody will tell you it's the people. And I've got now friends literally all over the world. And that's a great point. Would I miss them? Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Are you planning on competing next year on the indoor masters, on the indoor world masters?
Yeah, that's the next big. So I just started really getting serious about that in Turin. So that'll be the next meet. And then for me having and actually my wife as well, we're going to the European Masters in Italy at the end of September. So
nice.
those two competitions are about 4 months out now, and then 6 months. There's a gap of about 6 months. So that'll be really good in terms of being able to prepare for both of those meets.
Some moments ago, you mentioned about the weightlifting and the kind of like training that you normally do.
Yeah.
And I know that you actually took courses as as a weight lifting coach, let's say.
Yes.
And well, you have some also some studies on sports specifically.
Mhm.
So we're not talking here with just a master athlete. Well, he's actually let me check on the titles here. I have it here as physical education, master in sports psychology, and doctor in philosophy.
Yeah.
Under human performance under stress. That's
Yes.
your doctorate, right? So
Yes.
I want to talk about weightlifting and how do you take the weightlifting to become a better thrower or a
Mhm.
better sportsman
Yeah.
on any, let's say, discipline. How
Yeah. I have.
important is it, the weightlifting?
Yeah. I have a strong background. I coached as an assistant strength coach at the University of Illinois for 7 years. I coached everything from women's golf to the men's football team, men's basketball team, and I've had a lifelong interest in strength and conditioning. I'm going to start because of the time. I'm just going to probably talk around the masters athlete. As you probably know, we'd have two types of muscle fibers, fast twitch and slow twitch. As you get older, the fast twitch tend to disappear sooner. And so when it comes to training, and I want to make sure there's like a pyramid. So I'm really going to talk about people who have a good base. So they've done a lot of general conditioning, general kind of weight training. Maybe they've done some machine work. But there are several elements to be a successful masters athlete. Frankly, in any of the events up through maybe the 800 meters and beyond, but certainly all the jumps and all the throws and the sprints, you have to train your neurological system fast because we're all slowing down. So, you'll see the guys bragging on Facebook that I managed to deadlift 400 pounds and it was the bar is moving like this and it's going this fast. Waste of time. It's a waste of time. Now, a lot of people go, no, 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 I'm going to argue with you on that point. But if you have an opportunity cost where you're trying to trade off the limited amount of time you've got for training, speed, speed, speed. Everything's geared about the neurological stimulation through the weight training in this case. The second thing is about weight training. It needs to be somewhat whole body. So cleans and squats and push presses. And there are techniques involved with that. And I understand that if you have never been coached in some of those lifts, that's an issue. And there's a whole bunch of safety issues we haven't got time to get into. But from a principle point of view, whole body, speed, medium resistance. I mean, I'm not lifting light weights. In fact, just as a reference point, I can hang clean my own body weight. And it's like my party trick. So for those who are the bigger guys, I go, okay, I'll do a competition with you. We'll hang clean your body weight.
That's interesting.
But,
Yeah.
yeah, so I only weigh about 88 kilos, which is a little bit light. I'd like to be a little bit heavier. I've lost a bit of muscle mass as I've gotten older in the last 5 years. But I don't think I would ever weigh more than 90 kilos. Now, as you saw, I'm very lean. So we're not talking a lot of wasted tissue here. But that being said, agility and speed is everything in those events under probably, as I said, under the 800, maybe including the 800.
So you would think probably explosiveness is one of the qualities that you want to maintain all the way to be a successful master athlete.
I think you can work at it until you're in your 80s. It's just it won't be as explosive. I have a friend in England who's 83 years old, who's an ex-Olympic discus thrower. He's a phenomenal genetic freak. So I can't really speak to him as the normal guy, but he can do things that most people couldn't do when they were 20. But I think one has to make the attempt to stay explosive as you get older. And if you're doing the training that is slow, I mean, I've used bar accelerometers, and and I sometimes forget that you have to put like 97% effort into the movement. You can't have a workout where you're playing around at 75% mentally. And so there is a bit of a neurological mind control over how you move the bar fast. And you probably need to do things like, if you can, have access to timing. You can kind of do it on a video as well. You just measure it in milliseconds, how far the bars move to the same distance. That's getting kind of technical. To be very practical, lightish to medium heavy weights, move them quickly. Whole body.
It's really good.
Stay flexible. Do agility work. I do a lot of jump rope. I do running up and down one single step very, very, very quickly for hammer throwing. Very quick. Everything's quick.
What a great pieces of advice. I mean, that's amazing.
I'm passionate about this piece because one of the things and I'll just speak for throwers for a moment. A lot of the big guys come in from the 50s into the 60, men's 60 class. When you go to the World Championship and look at the physiques of the men who are in men's 70, there are no big guys.
That's interesting, yeah. So the amount of body mass that you lose because of
No, it's not. No,
it's not just that.
They're either dead. I mean, I'm being blunt here. They're either dead or the body weight itself has created knee injuries, and has slowed them down to the point
they cannot compete.
Can't move the lighter implements. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to, is changing the weight of the implements next year. So I hope I didn't offend anybody by saying that.
No, but I think it's reality. It's reality.
Yeah, there's that decade, you get to 70 and the big guys are very few and far between.
That's crazy. That's crazy. No, but really, really good comparison. And I think it's important to have it in mind. As a master athlete myself, I think these kind of advices that you're giving are highly important.
Oh, yeah.
Because,
no, I mean, I think these kind of forums, I wish somebody told me the things I know now when I was 25. You know?
Yeah, definitely. Now we've spoken about your history, but I think also based on your background, right? You worked on the pharmaceutical industry, like the health industry also, and all these titles that you were able to accomplish on your professional career.
Yeah.
I was reading, Guy has a website, is his name, Dirkin.com, and he has even papers that he published throughout the 70s and 80s, and most of the studies that he's done. I was reading a special document, a paper that he created regarding the use of anabolic steroids. Mm-hmm. And I found it really interesting. Can you tell us a little more of the work that you've done on that field? And I had some follow-up questions that we're probably going to talk about, but what do you think about the current stage of the sports industry currently, and the possibility of the enhancement drugs causing the kind of performances that we see?
Yeah, so I'll get to that. Just very briefly, because I don't want to bore the audience here. In 1988, I gave a lecture on anabolic steroids to the organization in America that licenses pharmacists in the US. So it was the state representatives of the 50 states. And they were fascinated. They didn't realize that the amount, steroids were being used by athletes particularly. They'd heard about it probably for bodybuilders. But in 1988, there was also the Olympics that Ben Johnson won the 100 meters and then got banned. And it became, so this is going on in sport. And historically, testosterone was discovered in the 1930s. They were using testosterone and its derivatives from the late 1940s. You start to see performances in the 1950s that are influenced by steroids or testosterone. I think the first anabolic steroid actually was about 1958. So having said all that, we're very well aware that the records set prior to 1990 in particular, I'll use that, but I'm skeptical about the 1990s. But prior to 1990, the women's discus record is insane. It is so much further than the two best throwers in the world, Sandra Perkovic and Valerie Allman. I consider them technically highly proficient, and they are ranked 18th and 17th on the all-time list for women discus throwers. So it's fully understood that drugs were being openly taken worldwide. Somebody was commenting on Facebook this morning about something. Those East Germans, blah, blah, blah. It was going on in the US and Western Europe as well, but the East German bloc system really enhanced the value of those drugs. So that's the history stuff. So what's happening today? And we talked a little bit about before we started the interview. I'm not really super current. I used to be really into this and on top of it. But I will cite a couple of things. In 2016, after the Rio Olympics, there was a survey done of multiple sports in the Olympics, and it was anonymous, so they were trying to get the most honest answer that they could find. And the answer to the question, have you in the last 12 months taken a performance-enhancing drug? 39% of respondents said yes. Those are the ones that actually said yes. So, was it 45 or 50%? Yeah, you could probably argue that. So following that paper, I read another article who referenced that in that particular survey. So what are these people taking? And nobody said anything specific, and I don't want to either in this context. But if you've got a micro lab with all the equipment that you need, there are probably, he said, 500 chemical compounds that would mimic or enhance or come really close to what you would expect to get out of more of the traditionally well-known performance-enhancing drugs. That's as much as I want to say. I'm going to leave the door open for speculation as to whether or not current crop of that's another subject. The current crop of young athletes are taking performance-enhancing drugs. I don't have anything definitive, and it would be unfair for me to say I believe X, Y, and Z.
But given the fact that, let's say, 40% accept that they're using it, it's a common practice, we could say. And I don't feel comfortable with this, but I mean, it's reality. The kind of performances, and that's something that we also spoke a few moments ago before we started this conversation, is the kind of performances that we're seeing nowadays are extremely unlikely, even based on history. Something that you mentioned that was really interesting was the 400-meter hurdles, right? And not pointing any fingers, right? It's just the history and the way that the actual timing has moved throughout the years. It's really difficult to get this kind of things, but there's also the other factor now that is not just the drugs enhancing, it's also the shoes and things like that, right?
Yeah. So I think the shoes actually do play a part in those track events. I did look at several other records and looked for what we call the inflection point. The easiest one to explain is when Florence Griffith Joyner set the current women's world record. The trend line was like so over the 100 years, and then boom, suddenly it popped up. I think that is worthy of this thoughtful discussion. So I'm very hesitant to point fingers at anybody because there are enhanced training techniques. There's better nutrition than we've ever had before. But I think one has to leave the door open, per the survey I cited, that there may be other mechanisms involved.
And things like, for example, like the Nike project in Oregon, right? Like the Oregon project that Alberto Salazar had. It was something that they were not breaking any rules, let's say, based on the current, let's say, drug enhancing, let's say, all the different codes that we currently have. But at the end, it was like systematically enhancing the performance using methods that are not widely known by the rest, right? So there was an advantage there.
Yeah, there are two things I always talk about in this subject. Is one is historically the athletes and their teams have always been ahead of the testers, but it can catch up. I mean, we've seen 8 years down the road, people being awarded a gold medal because they found that and retested with modern equipment the drug sample taken in 2008. We've got real examples of that. The other thing, though, and I always start with this, is since man came out of the cave, they have always sought the unfair advantage. And it's very easy to say, you know what, morally this is completely wrong, it should never happen. And I agree with that in the ideal world. In the real world, using the blunt term cheating has always been associated with sport. It's part of sport. Not right, but it's part of sport.
That's really interesting, and well, it's a nice point of view. Actually, it's true, right? It's just true. I want to get to know a little bit more. I know that we're running on your time a little longer than we expected. I think we are going good, but I want to get to know a little bit more about you, of the guy Dirkin that is not track and field. And I know that you are passionate also about other things like cars. And I would like to hear about that. How did you start with that? And I know you have a collection, and you've done even driving in competition. So how does that work?
Yeah, so my dad was a car guy. This is like the old story, right? Your dad starts to get you involved. When I was about 9 years old, he was playing around racing go-karts, and I would break in his engines for him. So I would drive multiple laps of the go-kart track. And I was later on, when I learned to drive, I was fortunate enough that we got a sporty car in my early 20s. I feel very fortunate. And then I went to America. So then I drove a $200 wreck for 7 years. So, and that was funny. There are a lot of people that know me. You should see this thing. I've got pictures of it. Once I graduated, I got back in. I bought myself a sports car, and I've always had some kind of sports car. Around 2005, I bought a V8. These are called American V8 Specials. They generally have fiberglass bodies. They're generally made in like an N of 1 or an N of 4 or 5 cars. And I've just enjoyed collecting these oddball things. But I've also, because they're oddball, I've gone to some of the best car shows in the world and get invitations to do that. And I'm not really a car show guy. We go there. So one of the reasons I put my website together is I have a number of interests, and people usually know me in one of these areas. It could be car racing, car collecting, athletic sports, somewhat academic stuff. So I'm trying to sell off some of the car. I don't have a huge number now. I've only got 4 toys left. And we've got plans to sort of sell those off. But I sold my race car this year. It's a very expensive hobby, and I'm retired. So, but again, it was that 2018. I was telling you that was a magic year. There was an amateur road racing event inside the Indianapolis 500 Speedway.
Nice.
And they only have about 3 road racing events, 3 or 4 there a year. And I won my class and got to drink the milk on the podium.
Nice. That's nice. So you're always showing up, and you're always competing and giving it all of your best, right? Because you always want to get to the podium.
Yeah, that was a fun experience to have. Never ever in my life would I have ever expected to be on the podium at Indianapolis.
But well, given the fact that you've competed in track and field, that you've done basketball, you've done all the things. I know that the strength that you have to drive a car under those conditions, the speed and everything, is really like, well, it's really difficult, right? And the kind of preparation you have to have, the temperature, the body weight, the water that you lose, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. Just talking about the physical demands of just sitting in the car. I probably have a heart rate similar to jogging throughout the whole race, probably about 125 beats a minute. So it's not just like you're sitting there relaxed. Some of that's to do with the heat and the G-forces. But after that Indianapolis race, I took my gloves off to get out of the car and had to put my gloves back on because the tube steel in the car had got to 160 or 170 degrees Fahrenheit.
Crazy.
It was unbelievably hot. And the daytime temperature was 30, 35, 100 Fahrenheit. So yeah,
really hot
that wasn't why I quit. I physically was sort of hanging in there, but the problem, there are things you can buy like a cool suit, and I should have invested in one when I was doing this. I never did, but yeah, you can kind of cool yourself off. But making a mistake at 180 miles an hour is not a good thing.
Not a good thing to do. Yeah. Hey, going back a little bit to the track and field, and I know that we just went through the pandemic. I mean, it was difficult, but what do you think? Well, how did it affect your sports results? Maybe going back to Tampere and not being able to, let's say, conquer the gold in the discus or the kind of performances that you were looking for. But how did it affect your training and, well, mainly your life? Everyone had some sort of like a difficult situation going through the pandemic, but in the sports piece, how did it affect you?
So in 2020, I helped organize a virtual competition, which is how I actually got to know some of the folks in Costa Rica. And the virtual competition was people would do their events around the world. And A level was like a real regular track meet. B was can't quite get all the pieces together. Maybe there's judges missing, qualified judges. And C was you can do it any way you can. And we gave awards in those three categories. But there were 1,500 athletes, 61 countries. And so that was one of the ways we kind of offset the pain worldwide. And I took a lot of personal satisfaction from that, because one of the things that was taken away from it is going to physically go to a world championship like Finland for 2 weeks costs a lot of money. And I think there are alternatives that are available. Perhaps it's in a virtual situation that you can include countries around the world that people would have a hard time going to those events. So that was kind of a takeaway from that. From a training perspective, the track got shut. I couldn't find anywhere to throw. And I built myself a collapsible plywood board.
I saw the video. Yeah, and I'm planning on doing it here.
Oh, okay.
It's really nice.
I sent a video on how to make one of these boards. So I built this board. I take it literally 100 meters down the road from where I'm sitting now. And there's a swamp floodplain. And there are cactus in it and red fire ants. And I don't know, I haven't seen snakes, but I know they're there. And I throw there. And I threw there in 2020. And I've still thrown there because since the pandemic, the track got rid of people that would throw the hammer. No, you're done. And then my coach moved away. So he lived locally. And so I'm like still in the 2020 mode. Now, I did find things like I threw initially off just polished wood, and that ruined my technique in the hammer because I didn't need to think about moving my feet. I just spun around.
Yeah.
So now I've made that a grittier surface. But that's how I throw today. Now, it's convenient, but the other thing which we did in 2020 and 2021, which most people didn't have access to this, two of the throwers in Florida own their own parcel of land with their private circle.
Nice.
Yes. So we competed regularly throughout 2020, 2021, and we still do. We still have those meets every 3 to 4 weeks. One's 2 hours north of me and the other's about 2 hours southwest. So it is pretty convenient to do that.
That's really nice. Yeah, you continue to compete against the guys that you normally compete. So that's good. That's huge. That's really good.
But I do associate. I mean, I've seen conditions in Asia and the Far East and how difficult it is to find places to throw of any kind of quality. My message is, with a little bit of ingenuity, you can probably find somewhere to throw. I don't know if there's a friendly farmer with a portion of the field that, you know, somebody would let you put your board down and throw the hammer. Snakes prohibited.
I even seen videos from Ryan Krauser building their own circle on their yard,
Yes.
right? So I think possibilities are endless, but I mean you have to commit, right? And actually
you
go
have
for
to
it.
you have to decide. It's not just you. You can get together with some buddies, and if there's a bit of cost involved. I also understand, though, for like my two friends, their outlay was quite expensive to put in concrete circles and cages. They both have cages. That's not achievable for everybody. I totally understand that. But there isn't really an excuse not to, is the message.
That's really good. Now, I think I'm going to close with this question for you. What do you think about Costa Rica? And I know that you came throughout a difficult weather season because it was a lot of rain. But what are your thoughts about Costa Rica? Not just the competition, I mean the country per se. And are you planning on maybe coming here and having some time, maybe even moving here and then starting to train here?
So I came to Costa Rica in about 2006, and it's one of the top countries in the world I've traveled to. I was fascinated with the variety of what the country has to offer. Now, admittedly, I was probably playing the tourist role. We went to the Arenal Volcano Lodge and down on the Pacific coast. But I also, partly because of my driving skills, I took all the dirt roads all over the mountains.
Nice.
So, yeah, I did this also in Ecuador, which was probably the hardest driving I've ever done, which is another story for another day. But I have my heart is very firmly attached to Costa Rica. Now, to answer your question, would I come back? It was disappointing about the weather this last weekend, and it was mixed up with track and field. But I did resolve to come back from more on a vacation point of view. My son and his new wife, they were married 2 weeks ago. They came to Costa Rica, I think, in the spring of last year, and they both work remotely and have said, maybe we should move to Costa Rica. Healthcare is good.
Really good.
Good. Yeah. For me, I haven't got to that. I am where I am right now. I've got my cost of living down to where it can be when you're retired, and it's my base to travel all over the place. I haven't decided if I need to move again, but as a foreign location, Costa Rica offers a lot more than potentially going on a Caribbean island today with the increasing potential for hurricanes with the climate change issue. So it's in the top list. Can't tell you tomorrow.
Hope to have you here at some point, maybe even training a bit. You can be my coach.
Oh, no problem. I would probably do that because I enjoy coaching. I usually do it as a secondary to my own coach. He has a lot of high school kids who've gone on probably as many as 70 to 100 who've got college scholarships. But it's
Nice.
really nice. They keep me young. And it also helps me think about my own technique when I'm watching a beginner, because they're focusing on the fundamentals. And no matter how far you are going down the road, the fundamentals are still the same. So that's a benefit to me. So coaching, no problem.
Well, guy, I really want to thank you for the opportunity of having this time. I mean, it was really interesting getting to know a lot more of your history and what is passionate about, what the things that you do and everything. So I really want to thank you for that, for the opportunity. Hopefully this is not going to be the last, and maybe we can explore and having more conversation like this one in the future. Any message that you want to share with the young throwers, with the young athletic community in Costa Rica? Any words of, let's say, motivation for them?
So, and I went through this with my own children. So they were successful in multiple sports. At some point, you need to decide on what you want to specialize in, probably at 14 or 15, not much later. So, from a young athlete perspective, once you've just made the decision to specialize, then it becomes a little serious in terms of your weekly plan. You know, do I go out with my friends? Do I go and trade? There's a trade-off for everything. So I think that's the first step, is when you make a decision that you're going to be deeply invested in one activity, surround yourself with people that know more than you know. That's my one piece of advice for a young person. Reach out to people who've done this before and ask them and learn from them. And from a master's perspective, a lot of masters athletes are first-time athletes. They're coming out, it's more of a social thing, but some of them are very, very good. So the same thing applies, is, you know, decide on what level you want to compete. But if you want to compete at the highest level, where are your resources? People, facilities, equipment, sort it out, decide if it's a priority or not. If it is a priority, go for it.
Well, Guy, I really want to thank you, as I mentioned before, for the time, for all your comments. Like this conversation was really good. It will help a lot of people here. So thanks a lot, and hope to have you here again at some point. You have a great rest of your day.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay.